This is Ray's Rant for the Masses. And if you're watching this now, you are the resistance. And I just saw Terminator Salvation, as you can tell from the title that I'm doing the review. Now, I decided that since a lot of people are badmouthing this film, it must be solely because of the fact is that they're comparing it to the last three. Now, going into this, I did kind of get the expectations of the last two. Hopefully, hoping that it was better than the third one because third one wasn't my favorite. I was hoping that they reinvented the franchise. So first, I'm gonna start off with the story, and then I'm gonna talk about what I thought of it. So as the story goes, is that it's about John Connor, who is now in 2018, but he feels like something's wrong with the war. He feels like it's not, as you can tell from the trailer, that it's not the war that his mother warned him about, as well as how can I explain? Like, what also ends up happening is that there's something new introduced into this war, which is the idea of a new Terminator, a new and improved Terminator, and not the one that we know. Well, not a new and improved, but a first of its kind, first that he hasn't been introduced to yet. And then there's a side story, which is the Terminator played by Marcus Sam Worthington. So what ends up happening is that the guy Marcus, he's put on death row. He donates his body to his technology. He wakes up and he's somehow in 2018. Now that he's reawoken there, he's trying to figure out what he's doing now. So basically what ends up happening is that, and I'm trying not to spoil things, but this is a spoiler alert. You find out that he is a Terminator, and what does this mean towards John Connor, and how will this affect the war? Especially because he doesn't believe that he's a Terminator, he believes that he's human. So that's basically, it's a very short and small premise. Without giving anything away, it's a very small premise. I mean, I gave away some, but there is this, like, the ending is this whole big thing that changes the entire franchise. So, well, it doesn't change the entire franchise. It's a big twist on the whole movie. So, basically, what I thought of the movie, I'm going to start off without comparing it to the original. When I started watching the film, first off, I said this premise is too simple. It's not something complex. So at the end, I was rewarded, which they reward you, but I felt like it took too long for me to get that reward. I felt like I had to wait and wait and wait, because to me, the Terminator story, if it would have ended the way I was going through the first half, the first 75% of this film, if it would have ended just like that, I would have been completely dissatisfied, and I thought it would have sucked. But I think that the film relied too much on that one, that ending. It's just like, here we go, we're building, and then here. But I felt that the movie was, since it was directed by Mac G, that he is a great action film. If you're looking for just an action film, then go ahead. If you're new to the Terminator franchise, then go ahead. But if you're an original fan of the originals, you're gonna feel like something's missing. And the thing is that it's the story. They rely too much on this one ending, whereas the other Terminators were like, this is your story, and they build it along across. Whereas this one is like, here's your little bullcrap story, and then like you're like, and then when it gets to the end, you're like, oh, okay. So on the second time, I think I'm gonna like this movie more. But the first time, I felt like it was like the story could have been way better. That's just my personal opinion. Especially when you go into the fourth one, you're trying to improve on the franchise. I felt there was so many possibilities that they could have gone with this, but instead they went on just the action route. I felt that another thing that kind of frustrated me too was that this movie was not about John Connor. I liked and I respect what they did with it, but I felt that when everybody's upset that Arnold Schwarzenegger is not in this film, he's not the Terminator, and that they don't see Arnold, so they want him in this movie. So when they go and they watch this movie, they're gonna be pissed because they don't want Christian Bale, because they didn't like him in Batman, which I did. I did like Christian Bale. I love Christian Bale as an actor. So to see him in this, I was like, well, it did not help his career in any way, because he didn't do such a great performance, not because of him himself and the performances that he's capable of, but because of how limited his what he can do with the story. The movie is mostly about Marcus, and a lot of people get upset because they're like, okay, so you have this name actor Christian Bale in this movie, and it doesn't do him justice. But the thing is that they tend to forget that the movie's about Marcus. But why have such a great actor as John Connor if you're gonna focus mostly on Marcus? So it didn't make sense. Plus, not to mention that since Christian Bale is such a great actor, I felt that this wasn't good. But you still needed a great actor for John Connor, which I think he was the best John Connor, but limited by the story. Also, another thing was that I felt that too many writers were put onto this. They should have just had Jonathan Nolan from the beginning, but because they used so many writers and because it was the director's decision, that they based it most on action instead of story, whereas the original Terminators did not, didn't do that. It was story, action, story, action, story, action, even story during action. Where this one was like, here's all your action scenes, non-stop action, and then you get this moment where you're like, oh, story, and it's like really brief moments. And the problem is that if you're looking for story, you get frustrated because of how short the story plots are. But when you're looking for action, you get pissed off because you're like, oh, get back to the action. You don't care about the story. So, um, that's my comparison to the original. I mean, just as it together, I felt that it was great. I loved it. It was definitely a great action ride, but I did expect more. Um, it did deliver on the action scenes. I'll give it that. The emotional scenes, it had its moments, but I think that, like I said, it relied too much on the ending. But I must say that that ending wrapped it up for me beautifully, and I felt that now they can go somewhere with this. But the thing is that now that they're signed for two more sequels, I'm worried if the next films are going to be this way, where they rely on the end, and that it's just, the story's not going to be that good. It's just an action scene. I mean, it is to reinvent it, but I think that this wasn't um, a good. If you're basing this on a future trilogy and not on the past, I don't think it was a good first one. I think it's a good continuance of the series, but not a good origin story for like what is being set up for later. Also, another thing that kind of frustrated me about the film was that you go from 2003 straight into 2018. You don't understand where John Connor gets his military training because they don't really introduce that. I mean, I understand that throughout the years he's kind of got this little thing going on, but they don't explain how he's so special ops. As well as another thing was that how does the robot city get built at the end? Another problem I had was, why was there a robot city that looked so nice? Like you will see in the movie, but it looked like a Apple store, and I was just like, well, why robots would not have that whole thing going on? I did like that the Terminators were more malicious and vicious in this film, where like I stood true more to the original and the first two. I like the homages. A lot of critics are criticizing it, saying that they ripped off too much of the past, but I felt that every time they put it in there, it was justified. I know during the creative process, they were like, oh, it would be really cool if we put this in there. But during the creative process, I know that it was justified in every single way where they put what. Also, I think everybody's acting was good, except I really was upset that they limited Christian Bale's performance to such a small role to me. He felt more like a co-star rather than the star, especially when the story is about John Connor. It's most and foremost. I don't think the Terminator franchise was built on anybody else but maybe Sarah Connor, and even then she gets kind of tossed to the side once the third one comes in. And the second one is kind of like conflicting. Like they're both co-stars, but then once the third one comes in, we know it's about John, and that's it. So what I'm trying to say? Like the whole Terminator franchise is not just relying on Arnold Schwarzenegger, which everybody makes it out to be. So to wrap up my whole thing about Terminator Salvation, I definitely thought it was good. I think we should judge it for what it is, not instantly compare it to the first two, because these McGee is not um, he is not James Cameron, and he never will be. As well as when it comes down to the writers, they are not the creators. They just not what I envisioned it. You got to take it as it is. Really, honestly, I think it should have ended with two, but I think that this one is faithfully um, tied in with two. Like they respect two more. The first two, not the third one. They kind of toss it away, but use it as a breaking launching off point. So I rated the first one a 9.5. The first Terminator. I rated the second one a 9. I rated the third one. I think I'm gonna give it an 8. But I give this one. I give it an 8.5. I definitely thought it was better than the third one. but it wasn't better than what I mean. It wasn't as good as it should